This is going to be topic 11, lifespan development.
And key concepts you'll understand after this discussion are going to be human development from conception to childbirth, the psychosocial theories of nature versus nurture, the continuous state of physical, cognitive, psychosocial development from young to old, the impressionable time of middle childhood and the health concerns that faced adolescence, moral development and facing adult responsibilities, and a greater understanding of acceptance of the stages of dying. Personal development. Paramedics encounter patients of all ages. Understanding developmental stages will help adjust approaches accordingly. With connecting Personal development. Paramedics encounter patients of all ages. Understanding development stages will help adjust approaches accordingly. Aids in this will aid you in their therapeutic connections. Development can be divided into three components: of physical development, and that's bodily changes; cognitive development, which is reasoning, ability to think, and memory; and psychosocial development, which are emotions. Theories of personal development. Theories that explain human development over a lifespan take into account physical, mental, psychosocial aspects of a person, trying to provide a meaningful explanation of the changes that commonly occur. Psychosocial and psychosocial theory. And we're going to start this off with a psychosocial theory in the 1800s by Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud attached importance to sexuality, linked psychosocial development to sex. Human psychic development was linked to physical growth. Freud's id consisted of a person's biological needs, such as water and food. Contained the will to live, the id did, drive to reproduce, and the concept of pleasure. The ego of Freud is a personal sense of self and physical well-being, interacting with the world. The ego tempers the id with reality. An example of this is, and this is one the book used, sex is pleasurable, but if it were pursued to the degree that you pretty much shut out all other social interaction, your ego would stop or prevent that from happening. The superego is societal values that run counter to the id. Works to suppress the id, forces the ego to consider moral behavior. Freud theorized that it was the ego that kept the conflict between the id and the superego to a minimum. Psychosocial theory continued here, and this is Erik Erikson, and he was a student of Freud. Dismissed the centrality of sexuality, so he kind of disagreed with Freud a little bit. It didn't all revolve around sex. Favored social influences, and this is nature versus nurture questions. People develop because of social pressures to conform and coexist. Stressed the role of the ego. Freud's stressed physical developments and supported the idea that nature controlled one's development. Erikson stressed the social influences and supported the ideal of nurture more than nature. Behaviorism and cognitive development theory. Behaviorism, and we pretty much know this guy. This is Pavlov and his dog. So Pavlov's experiments with the dog kind of set the stage on that. B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning believed human behavior is a function of an interaction, both positive and negative, with the social environment. Albert Bandura, social learning theory, expanded on behaviorism and suggested people learned in three ways: by direct instruction, direct experience, or observation. And cognitive theory development. This looked at how the mind was developed. Piaget suggested people develop in a building block fashion. One learned behavior building upon another. And people learn in schemes, or kind of like algorithms, scaffolding, if you will. Intelligence is a function of the person and the ability to create new schemes and successfully adapt. Sources of human development are going to be things like assimilation, integrating new information into a pre-existing matrix. So I assimilated that information. Accommodation, changing of the preconceptions to allow for new information. So completely blinking out to where you can take on this new information, essentially. Topics in human development. The debate has always been risen, genetics versus environment and society, and which one of these actually play a greater role. Conception to childbirth. Topics in this are going to be conception, genetics and human development, pregnancy, childbirth, and the newly born. Process. Millions of spermatozoa are deposited in the vaginal vault, and they begin a journey to the cervix and into the fallopian tubes. Spermatozoa reach the egg or ovum. One penetrates to fertilize and fertilizes the ovum, now called a zygote. The zygote starts to divide repeatedly and forms a hollow, fluid-filled ball, a blastocyst. Cells inside of the blastocyst will form the human. Cells on the outside will form a protective covering that eventually develops into the placenta. The zygote has been traveling down the fallopian tubes and into the uterus. At the end of the first week, the zygote implants into the uterine lining. Amnion, which makes amniotic fluid, and the chorion, which will make the placenta, start to form. The placenta provides the infant with nutrition through the umbilical cord, which connects the mother and child. Spontaneous abortions in about 30% of pregnancies, and the zygote fails to implant, and the pregnancy is spontaneously aborted. In the weeks following implantation, the zygote will now be called an embryo and is rapidly dividing and laying down the foundations for all major organ systems. This is the greatest risk for fetal malformations from tetragens, drugs, and alcoholic beverages. Genetics and human development. Every person is a result of a union of two sex gametes, a spermatozoa and an ovum. Each gamete has 23 chromosomes, creates the genotype, mitosis, subsequent division of the cells, and the phenotype, outward expression of the chromosome. Two X chromosomes result in a female, one X and one Y chromosome result in a male. Each chromosome provides genes, and this determines physical characteristics. Dominant genes, one parent's genes control the child's characteristics. Examples of this: if you have a dominant brown eye gene, child is probably going to have brown eyes. Recessive genes do not control the characteristics. Some genetic diseases are linked to sex chromosomes as well. Pregnancy. Viable after the 9th week. Fetus comes to term about the 9th month. Pregnancy stages are divided into trimesters. The first trimester, germinal period, and you have high hazards in there. We talked about tetragens. The second trimester, rapid growth, and the signs of life. The final trimester. If the pregnancy were to be terminated prematurely, the infant would be viable in the last trimester. Factors contributing to infant mortality. Advanced maternal age, mom greater than 35, domestic violence, approximately 8% of pregnant women are battered, and poor health, including the lack of prenatal care and nutrition. We had talked about these here in the previous slide. This would be the placenta, uterine cavity, amniotic fluid, amniotic sac, fetus. Childbirth. Accumulation of 9 months of growth and development. Labor begins when the uterus starts to contract, pushes fetus into the birth canal, dilates the cervix through widening and thinning, takes about 12 hours, but can range from 1 hour to 24. Delivery of the infant begins with rapid passage down the birth canal, may take upwards of an hour. Final stage is the delivery of the placenta. The newly born. Dramatic physiological changes occur to adapt to extrauterine life or life outside of the uterus. Cardiopulmonary system switches from dependence to independence, and umbilical blood flow diminishes. Raising carbon monoxide levels stimulates the first breath. This increases interthoracic pressure and causes the cardiac pulmonary trunk to shunt to reserve blood flow and then close. And if you need more on this, this is going to be chapter 19 and 20 of the A&P review. The infant. First year of existence revolves around eating, sleeping, and growing. At 4 months, the infant's sleep-wake cycles start to approximate that of an adult-ish. Physical development. Average newborn weighs between 3 to 3.5 kilograms at birth, almost triple in the first year. Challenge to adapt to the outside world. High heartbeat and respirations, maintaining ventilations represent one of the greatest challenges. That's due to the physiology. They have a narrower pathway. Primarily breathes through the nose. Fewer alveoli to exchange oxygen increases the respiratory rate. Diaphragm is limited in its ability to sustain rapid respirations. Increased metabolic demand upon the body to produce heat. Infant can quickly fatigue and then experience respiratory distress and failure. First 6 months, neuromuscular development. Primitive reflexes start to wane. Motor neurons with the spinal cord mature. Paramedics should be attentive to the presence of infantile reflexes, limp extremities, Moro reflex, rooting reflex, sucking reflex, palmar grasp, tonic neck reflex, Babinski's reflex, and we'll talk about all of those here in just a second. Let's go back to one of those here really quick. Moro reflex is arms extend whenever they're startled, so their arms kind of extend out. Rooting reflex, turn towards the cheek whenever they're stroked, so if you stroke on their cheek, they'll turn towards it. Sucking reflex, if you kind of tickle the top of their lip, they'll suck on your finger. Palmar grasp, infants grasp an object pressed against their palms. They got a good grip for their size. Tonic neck reflex, turning the infant's head to the side causes ipsilateral arms to straighten and contralateral arms to bend. And those are fancy $5 words for ipsilateral means on the same side. So if you turn kiddo's head to the right arm is going to straighten. And then the other arm, the left arm, is going to bend. Babinski reflex, fanning of the toes and extension of the great toe caused by stroking the lateral soles of the feet. So we get a bad Babinski sign on a kiddo. If we got the same one in an adult, we would think they had some sort of brain injury. Infant experiences the greatest amount of growth during this period. Their bones, their muscle mass, control over muscle groups. This results in crawling, cruising, and walking. Developmental milestones represent a typical child's development, are used to gauge an individual child's development against a norm. So we really look at, the point of that is we really look at various developmental milestones to be sure that they've achieved these. Cognitive development. Sensory input is used to gain knowledge. Primitive reflexes are building blocks. Future experiences are assimilated into the old schemes. Language skills development. Cooing, simple vowel sounds, or preverbal gestures, pointing, uttering first words at about 12 months. Speech develops rapidly. Infant's vocabulary expands to over 200 words. Psychosocial development. Bonding establishes a nurturing relationship between the mother and the child. Influences on this, though, are going to be separation and difficult delivery and breastfeeding. Temperament begins to manifest. Personal effect and emotional expression begins. Socialization will affect social competencies later in life. And a test on this is the ability to withstand separation. Autism also may be discovered at this age in life as infant stages. Parent-child relationships, there are several types. There are nurturing parents. They provide clarity of communication, make demands for mature and maintain parent control. Permissive or indulgent parents tend to give control over to the child by not establishing boundaries or routines. Authoritarian parents always need to be in control and tend to demand the highest level of maturity. And then uninvolved parents, little commitment to parenting. This is going to be Table 9.1, comparison of vital signs between a newborn and a 1-year-old infant. Start at the top here. 120 to 160 is the normal heart rate for a newborn. And we start to see a normalization occur to what we're more familiar with. 1-year-old, 2-year-old, the closer that we get to 8, or the closer that we get to an adult age or adolescent age, what we'll see is a normalization of the heart rate. Respirations, 40 to 60, awful fast whenever they're small. And this kind of normalizing at 1-year-old. Blood pressure should be above 60 millimeters of mercury systolic. And a 1-year-old should start as long as their blood pressure is systolically above 70. After that, when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, the formula is 70 plus 2 times their years in age. And these are the reflexes that we talked about earlier. Examples here. This is a Morrow reflex. Extends the arms when startled. And a rooting reflex. Right here. If we scratch the cheek over here, kiddo will turn towards the direction that we scratched his cheek on. Sucking reflex. Palmar grasp reflex. This is going to be a Babinski's reflex. Whenever we stimulate the palmar area, toes should go down to remove the ball of the foot away from the stimulus. But in a kiddo, toes go back and presents the palmar surface to us, which is kind of the reverse. Now, as this goes away, and these first looks at the reflex kind of start normalizing, and we start to get older, this will normalize to what a Babinski should be, which is toes downward. Tonic neck reflex, turning the infant's head to the side, causes ipsilateral arm to straighten and contralateral arm to bend. That's this one here. Turn kiddo's head this way, this arm straightens, and the opposite arm bends. And kiddo could use some heat. He's looking a little blanchy. Preschool children, early childhood. Age of 2 to 5, toddler. Period of growth, 5 pounds and 3 inches of height a year. Spinal column lengthens. Internal organs ascend under the protection of the thoracic cage. The pulmonary system continues to grow. And the nervous system development is almost complete. Peripheral nervous system is myelinated, which allows for the development of fine motor skills. The brain has attained almost 90% of its adult mass. Physical development. Complex and motor activities are learned. Run, jump, hop, and throw. Toilet and dressing skills are also learned. By 6, a child can tie his shoes. Sex impact can be noted. Males, force or power, and females, fine motor skills. Improved coordination. Play period of sibling rivalry can be seen. Cognitive development. Paget stated that this was the pre-operational stage, and their thinking is concrete. Cannot think in abstract. Paramedics should be careful to construct their statements, or careful what they say, because they are concrete thinkers. Symbolic thought and mathematical reasoning develops. Language concepts develop. Syntax and semantics, the rules of grammar and the meaning of the words. Practical application of the language. Sexes become more evident. Female tend to ask questions, make requests more indirectly, maintain more eye contact, and use more nonverbal cues. Psychosocial development. Play has a pivotal role, and cognitive theory stages of this. One is functional play, performance and simply repeated movement, and then there is constructive play, common objects and tries to build things, and then there is pretend play, substitute oneself into another character, and then games and rules, which encourages an understanding of interpersonal relationships as well as a relation of abstract concepts in the real world. School-age children. Physical development continues, slowing of physical growth and lower mortality in this age group. Cognitive development, interactive with the environment, focuses on objects and events. Piaget's concrete operational stage, comprehension of multifaceted problems and concrete operational concepts, spatial relationships and time all come into play in this age group. Gardner suggested we had multiple intelligence in this age group, which we could see varying language skills, musical skills, logical skills, hands-on or kinesthetic skills, personal and interpersonal skills, and the ability to form bonds and a social self. Psychosocial development, peers, school, and family are modified to the child's sense of self. Children often manifest their differences in achievement motivation. Learning-oriented achievement motivation, attaining competence in an area of study, and this would be intrinsic. Learning-orientated, self-motivated, so to speak. And then performance orientation, more interested in pleasing others, and this would be extrinsic. Peer relations. Piaget stated that children in middle-aged school overcome egocentrism, or I am the center of my universe, start to relate to others more in terms of common interests and goals, and so on. Parents have lesser influence than they did whenever they were younger because they are not their peers. Friendships are formed with same-sex friends. Females, close and intimate friendship with one person, and then males, larger circles of acquaintances. Popular children form friendships easily. Confident, good-natured, and energetic physical traits that support athleticism. Conformity to the group is stress. Peer pressure can cause children to make rash decisions. And we talk about divorce a little bit in this section. May result in problems of trust and intimacy, divided loyalties, inconsistent discipline, and long periods of tension and discord can come together to produce fear of intimacy. Can be problematic for the paramedic. Gender identity also comes out in this. Sense of being male or female. In some cases, psychological alignment or assignment of a gender may be in conflict with biological sex assignment. Child may attempt to maintain androgyny, having both male and female qualities, for a time. The paramedic needs to remain non-judgmental in this period. This is figure 9.6, children learning balance and coordination by riding their bicycles, and figure 9.7. Children tend to gravitate to the same-sex friendships. Adolescent, which is a stormy transition from childhood to adulthood. Physical development, there's changes in physique, puberty, males get facial hair, enlargement of the penis, and first ejaculation. Females development of breasts and widening of the hips, and the first menarche. Adolescent health concerns, sex in the adolescent, which would be risk of sexually transmitted diseases like chlamydia, herpes, and HPV. A high rate of teen pregnancy can occur in this stage. Obesity, chaotic schedules, and the ease of availability in junk foods and peer pressure contribute to poor nutrition. Other extremes on this would be anorexia and bulimia. Teenage suicide, top 3 causes of teenage death. Frequently the result of high stress event and or inadequate coping mechanisms. Paramedics should take all teenage depression and suicide attempts seriously. Cognitive development revolves around using logic to solve problems, seeing possibilities, and engineering new ideas. Piaget said that this was the formal stage, application of logic to abstract ideas to solve problems. Psychosocial development. Adolescent returns to egocentrism, formulate idealisms with regard for practical reality. Turn attention to morality and their own moral development. Kohlberg's stages of moral development are pre-conventional morality. Avoidance of pain is what this is. Morality of an act is defined by the positive or negative outcomes. Then we have simple conventional morality, being seen as a good person by friends and family. And then law and order morality conforms to rules for the sake of the rules. Post-conventional morality, concerned with abstract concepts such as justice and democratic principles. And then principle-based morality. Having developed a strong set of principles, these adolescents conform to their principles rather than face self-condemnation. Early adulthood. Period of striving and accomplishment. Marriage, childbirth, college, or work. Physical development. Most peak in their 20s. Obesity is more common. Unhealthy decisions may be made. Smoking, alcoholism, or smoking, alcohol, unprotected sex. And then in cognitive development, young adults tend to explore the world and seek out new experiences. Engendered questions about themselves and people with whom they associate and the world in general. They explore their world through interaction with others, engaging in dialectic thinking. Psychosocial development. Erikson's the choice between intimacy and isolation. And we're essentially on the social clock in this phase. Love and friendship. Most seek out monogamous relationships. Intimacy, passion, and commitment. Marriage. Hypothetically, marriages are an equal partner relationship in which shared concerns and responsibilities help form the bond. Conventional male head of household relationships are on the decline, and divorce occurs in about 50% of the first marriages. Most occur in early adulthood. Parenthood. Most young adults have less preparation for parenthood than they did for their livelihood. Results in strain which places a burden upon their relationships. Many mothers become single parents, depend upon extended families for support and assistance. Paramedics should understand that single mothers may have limited resources. EMS is one of the few social supports readily available. Middle adulthood. Period of maximal productivity, readjustment, realignment, physical decline, and changes in interpersonal focus. Physical development. Decreased strength and loss of muscle mass. Outward signs of aging, graying of the hair, loss of hair, weight gain, and wrinkled skin. Loss of sensory acuity and hearing loss. Climacteric. Age-related decrease in sex hormone production. Men is a gradual decline, and women go into menopause or have a cessation of menses. Cognitive development. Intellectual abilities show a decline at about age 68. Significant loss of intellectual capacity does not occur until age 80. Crystallized intelligence. Middle-aged adults begin to solidify their understandings. Ability to use long-term memory, experiences, and skills to resolve problems. Psychosocial development. Midlife crisis can occur, readjustment and realignment. Idea of legacy. Life had meaning. Aging parents. Children of aged parents, particularly daughters, are often expected to care for their parents. For some, the strain of caring for aged parents, especially if they lack financial means, results in frustration, anger, and in rare cases, elderly abuse. Late adulthood. Life expectancy. Traditionally, 65 years of age and older is this age group. Poor marker for onset of senses, and that's the loss of cell power for division and growth. Senescence. Breakdown in the body's ability to monitor for organ systems as well. Failure to repair those organs occurs. Stereotypical view of this time period is ageism, considering the elderly to be frail or feeble based upon interactions with a limited percentage of the entire population. Life expectancy. A person who reached the age of 65 in 2000 can expect to live another 18.9 years. A child born in the year 2000 could expect to be alive at least 86.9 years. And this is a result of improved sanitation, better health care, improved nutrition, reduced death rates in children and young adults. Physical development. Most visibly impacted by the aging of skin, sags and wrinkles, and subcutaneous tissue. Bones tends to demineralize, osteoporosis. Cardiovascular, cardiopulmonary, and sensory systems decline over time and each organ fails. Cognitive development. Changes in mental functioning are generally related to the health of the person, not the age. Delirium is a sudden change in mental function. Acute brain syndrome, usually associated with reversible metabolic derangements. Example of this would be an adjustment of the sodium. Hyponatremia. Senile dementia, result of irreversible damage to the brain, typically is manifested over a long period of time. An example of this would be Alzheimer's disease. Psychosocial development, Erickson's integrity versus despair. Efforts to maintain one's dignity and using one's wisdom for the greater good will lead to feelings of integrity. Chronic poor health and substandard living conditions may result in an elderly person to fall into despair. Most elderly persons want to be self-sufficient and live as independent as possible. Examples of this are going to be assisted living facilities, adult care programs, at-home long-term care programs. Last but not least here, we're going to talk about death and dying. Most begin to plan for it. Acceptance should not be confused with desire. However, a desire to die and suicide are closely linked to aging. And this can be because of depression and terminal illnesses. Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of dying. Denial is pretty much the refusal on the part of the patient. Anger, angry at the world and angry at God. Bargaining, an attempt to bargain with God. Depression, this is a natural acceptance and of the inevitable and the start of mourning. And then acceptance, and this would be the acceptance of death, and those would be the 5 stages. In conclusion, a person undergoes dramatic changes over the span of an entire lifetime. Understanding changes and impacts helps the paramedics empathize, allows the paramedic to adjust patient care to the patient's stage of life development, and ensures a more therapeutic outcome.
And if you have any questions concerning this topic, my name is Roy Smith, Smith@, SamaritanEMSOK.com, or 405-492-8243. Thank you.